There's a moment in one of the early videos where Jack is standing in a room, pointing his camera at the ceiling, and above him, growing out of the plaster, are mushrooms. Not damp patches, not peeling paint, actual mushrooms. And rather than look horrified, he sounds almost delighted, like he's just found a fiver in an old coat pocket. That single moment tells you everything you need to know about why Duncombe House Diaries has taken over the internet. Because the reaction most people would have in that situation, panic, regret, maybe a quiet cry in the car, isn't the one you get here. What you get instead is this boundless, slightly ridiculous cheerfulness in the face of something that would make a grown adult question every decision they've ever made. And people cannot get enough of it. In a world where renovation content is everywhere, where every other channel is about flipping houses, gutting period features, and painting everything gray, Jack and Jazzy came along with a crumbling, flood-damaged, Grade 2 listed building in the Staffordshire countryside and just started fixing it, not for a TV network, not with a production company behind them, just the two of them, a camera and what Jack himself describes as being a pair of particularly hapless, blindly romantic, and eternally optimistic nincompoops. Within months, millions of people were watching. But the story of how they got there is more interesting than most people realize. Duncombe House sits within Calwich Park in the village of Ellestone, Staffordshire. From the outside, it looks like exactly what it is, an old English country house with architectural details that belong to another era. Gabled outer bays, decorative balustraded arches, angled bay windows, a central gabled porch with an open basket arch. The kind of house you'd sketch if someone asked you to draw what a quintessential mid-Victorian estate house looked like. The building has roots going back to between 1844 and 1876, constructed by a man named Augustus Duncombe as part of his broader effort to improve the estate. Historians and architectural researchers have suggested it may have been designed by William Byrne, one of the more celebrated architects of the Victorian era, known particularly for his country house work in Scotland and northern England. Whether that attribution holds fully or not, the bones of the building are unmistakably considered. This wasn't thrown up cheaply. Whoever designed it cared about how it looked, which makes what happened to it over the following century and a half all the more striking. By the time Jack and Jazzy found it in 2024, the house had been sitting vacant for several years. Whatever had been holding it together, maintenance, attention, occupation, had long since stopped, and nature, as it tends to do, had started moving in. 2 separate floods had done serious damage. The phrase Jack uses is 2 positively biblical floods, and the evidence backed him up. Water staining on the walls, structural damage, and yes, those mushrooms growing directly out of a ceiling. Electrical wiring that dated back to the 1940s, still threaded through the walls, plumbing that appeared to have last been seriously looked at some decades earlier. Rooms packed floor to ceiling with the accumulated belongings of generations, 2 centuries worth of junk that had simply been sealed inside and left. The house was, to put it plainly, a wreck, and they bought it anyway. This is the part of the story that hooks people right from the start, because there's something almost absurd about the decision. Jack is not a builder. Jazzy is not a professional contractor. They didn't come to this with a team of tradespeople on speed dial and a budget large enough to make the problem go away quietly. They came to it the way most people would, slightly wide-eyed, armed with optimism, and apparently unbothered by the gap between where the house was and where they needed it to be. What Jack and Jazzy actually are, in any professional sense prior to the channel, hasn't been something they've made a central part of the story, and that reticence is interesting in itself. So much of creator culture is built on the backstory, the origin myth, the here's who I was before. Jack and Jazzy largely skip that. The channel isn't about them in that way, it's about the house. What comes through in the content, though, is that they're clearly not as helpless as Jack's self-deprecating narration might suggest. Jazzy, as the Slate piece noted, can regularly be spotted doing targeted demolition, properly, competently, without ceremony. Jack knows how to operate a self-leveling laser and has clearly spent enough time reading and researching to know what he's dealing with when he opens up a wall or pulls up a floorboard. They're not professionals, but they're not amateurs stumbling around blindly either. They're somewhere in the middle, ordinary people taking on an extraordinary project and actually making progress. For the renovation itself, they brought in Matthew Montague architects to work on the extensions, alterations, and conversion of the outbuildings. That decision tells you something too. They're not just patching things up, there's a considered, planned approach to how Duncombe House gets restored and adapted for modern living while keeping its historical character intact. This isn't a slap-and-go job. But the scale of what they're dealing with is genuinely massive, and the channel documents every step of it. If you've never watched an episode of Duncombe House Diaries, the format is harder to describe than it sounds. It isn't really a renovation tutorial. It isn't a lifestyle vlog. It isn't quite like anything else in the home renovation space, and that, it turns out, is the whole point. Once a month, a new video lands on the YouTube channel. Each episode follows the same loose rhythm. Jack narrates in a style that has been compared, with good reason, to a period drama protagonist talking into a journal. The soundtrack reinforces that feeling, drawn from compositions that could have been lifted directly from a Jane Austen adaptation. Gentle, unhurried, slightly wistful. The effect is that you're not just watching someone fix a house, you're watching someone fall in love with one. Jack's narration is genuinely unlike anything else on the platform. The Slate piece that helped break the channel to a mass American audience described it as a dash of Mary Poppins and lashings of Bertie Wooster, and that's as accurate a description as you're likely to find. There's this unshakable good humor to it. When the wiring turns out to be a nightmare, he doesn't complain, he explains it with the kind of fondly exasperated tone you'd use to describe a disaster that happened to someone else. When a wall comes down and reveals something unexpected, it's always terribly exciting rather than terrifying. And then there are the finds. The house, having sat sealed for years, was essentially a time capsule. Clearing those rooms out became a series in its own right. Treasure Tuesday on Instagram, where Jack and Jazzy showcased some of the more remarkable objects they uncovered. A 19th century clergyman's diary, a box of 78 RPM records, an issue of Good Housekeeping from 1977, with the lead story, Are We Being Unfair to Uglies? An 80-year-old pair of waterproofed canvas wading trousers that still had mouse droppings inside them, which Jazzy gamely pulled on once they'd been thoroughly shaken out. There's also what Jack affectionately refers to as the boxless box of nails, essentially a fused square lump of nails that had spent so long in a flooded room that the cardboard box they came in completely dissolved, leaving the nails corroded together into a kind of solid block. His description of this as terribly exciting became a minor running joke among the audience. And then there's the ent. On the property, there's a large tree whose bark has developed markings that look with startling accuracy like a face. Not vaguely, not if you squint, actually like a face, rendered in the bark, wearing what appears to be a deeply disapproving expression aimed directly at the house, as if the tree itself has spent decades watching this place fall apart and is not remotely amused about it. The audience adopted it immediately. These details, the mushrooms, the clergyman's diary, the disapproving tree, are the kind of things that turn a renovation channel into something people talk about. They give the audience something to hold on to, running threads that carry across episodes and make returning viewers feel like they're part of something ongoing. The channel built steadily through its early months. The audience that found it first were the type of viewers who seek this kind of content out. Heritage enthusiasts, renovation followers, Anglophiles watching from abroad. Word of mouth in those communities is strong. Comment sections filled up with people recommending it to each other. The numbers were growing, but it was still a niche thing. And then April 2025 arrived. Slate, one of the United States' most widely read online publications, ran a piece in late April 2025 with a title that didn't hold back. This YouTube series about an old British house is the one thing keeping me going. The article hit a nerve that was immediately obvious from the response it generated. It wasn't just that it praised the channel. It was that the writer articulated exactly why the channel meant something at that specific moment in time. In a media landscape saturated with bad news and the relentless churn of a world that felt like it was unraveling at speed, here was a channel about putting something back together, carefully, cheerfully, with no apparent agenda other than the belief that this old house was worth saving. The piece got shared widely. Comment sections on social media filled with people saying they'd binge-watched everything that same evening. Americans who had never heard of Ellestone, Staffordshire, suddenly found themselves emotionally invested in whether a set of Victorian outbuildings were going to be structurally sound enough to restore. The numbers reflected it. On TikTok, the channel's following climbed to over 282,000, with the videos accumulating nearly 700,000 likes, a remarkable figure for content that moves at a monthly rather than daily pace. One TikTok post asking a simple question, "It's been 6 months, should we have bought a new build instead?" racked up over 334,000 likes on its own. On Instagram, the account under Jazzy Sayer's name crossed 1.15 million followers. With an engagement rate that third-party analytics describe as good, compared to accounts of a similar size, which in influencer terms means the audience is real, active, and actually watching. These aren't bot numbers, these are people who care. The question worth asking is why, specifically why this channel at this moment, when there are dozens of renovation channels doing broadly similar things. Part of the answer is the house itself. There's a difference between watching someone renovate a modern semi-detached and watching someone slowly bring a Grade 2 listed Victorian building back from the edge. The stakes feel higher, the history feels heavier. The house has a personality that a new build simply can't replicate, and the content picks that up constantly. Every stripped wall reveals something unexpected. Every cleared room tells a small story about the people who lived there before. But the bigger part of the answer is the philosophy that underpins everything Jack and Jazzy do. In the current renovation content landscape, the dominant trend is stripping out period features and replacing them with something clean and neutral. Cornicing comes down, fireplaces get boarded over, original tiles get ripped out and replaced with poured concrete. The interiors of genuinely old, genuinely characterful houses get hollowed out and filled with the same aesthetic you can find in a hotel lobby in any city in the world. Jack and Jazzy are doing the opposite. Their stated intention from the beginning has been to restore Duncombe House as close to its original form as possible. When they find something intact beneath the damage, the instinct isn't to replace it, it's to understand what it is and figure out how to save it. That position is increasingly rare in the space, and it resonates with an audience that has watched enough renovation shows to be tired of watching history get demolished in the name of resale value. The Slate piece put it well. This is content about people who want to rescue something old and worthy, at a time when that instinct has started to feel countercultural. The financial reality of Duncombe House Diaries is also worth examining, because it demonstrates something genuinely interesting about how the content economy works in 2025. Monthly uploads to YouTube, a relatively modest TikTok presence by the standards of the fastest-growing accounts, an Instagram following built around a renovation project rather than around a personality cult. None of these individually look like a blueprint for serious income, and yet the numbers tell a different story. Third-party income estimates based on combined platform data, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, put the channel's total annual revenue across all streams somewhere between $278,000 and $370,000. Monthly Instagram earnings alone are estimated at between $3,500 and nearly $5,000. These are not figures you associate with a channel that posts once a month and focuses entirely on one slow-moving renovation project in the English countryside. What it demonstrates is that a deeply engaged, highly loyal audience converts better than a large, indifferent one. Jack and Jazzy don't have the subscriber count of the biggest creators on the platform. They have something arguably more valuable, an audience that actually cares, that has been following a long-form ongoing story since the beginning, and that has formed a genuine attachment to the outcome. That audience buys things. They visit the merch shop at duncombehousediaries.co, UK, which sells items made to order from natural materials in factories powered by renewable energy. And the fact that those details are front and center in how the shop presents itself tells you exactly who the audience is and what they value. The channel isn't chasing viral moments. It's building something with a long arc, and in a creator economy that often rewards the opposite. The fact that this approach has generated genuine income at this scale is notable. There's a broader trend that Duncombe House Diaries sits inside, even if Jack and Jazzy didn't set out to embody it deliberately. The appetite for what's been loosely called slow content has been building for years. Long-form videos, monthly rather than daily uploads, projects that play out over years rather than weeks. Channels where the process is the point, not the finished product. This contrasts sharply with the short-form, algorithm-chasing, high-frequency upload culture that still dominates most corners of YouTube, and the audiences that have migrated towards slower, more considered content have proven to be unusually sticky. They don't just subscribe, they stay. Heritage restoration specifically has become a distinct category within this. Channels documenting the repair of old buildings, the recovery of forgotten craftsmanship, the gradual transformation of derelict spaces into something livable. These have found audiences that the mainstream renovation content world has largely ignored. The viewers aren't just watching for tips. They're watching because the act of preservation, of refusing to let something disappear, feels meaningful in a way that interior design flips don't. Duncombe House Diaries arrived at the right moment for that audience. And because the house is a Grade 2 listed building, which means there are legal constraints on what can be changed and how, The restoration has an added layer of complexity and authenticity that a standard renovation can't replicate. Every decision Jack and Jazzy make has to be considered not just against their own preferences, but against the requirements of heritage protection. That constraint produces better storytelling even if it makes the project harder. Limitations create drama. And in this case, they also create a sense that the work genuinely matters beyond just Jack and Jazzy having a nicer house. The story of Duncombe House Diaries isn't finished. It isn't even close to finished. The house itself has years of work ahead of it. The outbuildings are still to be addressed. The plans drawn up with Matthew Montague Architects for extensions and conversions haven't all been executed yet. What's remarkable is that the audience already knows this and has decided they're in for the whole thing. They're not watching to find out if the house gets done. They're watching because the house getting done is almost beside the point. What they're actually watching is a story about two people who looked at something broken and decided it was worth their time, their money, their energy, and then got on with it. In a landscape where most content is optimized for quick consumption and immediate gratification, that decision to take the long view has built something quietly extraordinary. Jack described the two of them as blindly romantic and eternally optimistic nincompoops. And he wasn't wrong exactly, but there's another word for people who look at a building with mushrooms growing out of the ceiling and flooded rooms and wiring from the 1940s and think, I can fix this. Determined. And it turns out, a very large number of people on the internet are absolutely desperate to watch someone who is.